It's didn't put it on the agenda, but what we've been doing in the past few weeks is opening the floor up to comments and discussions on anything that the address or the readings or indeed the musical selections have done for you. So we'll open that up now.
Just thinking, to actually interesting thing, that doesn't appear nearly as good on the radio.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it benefits from a good stereo system. Yeah.
I guess the dilemma, the freedom dilemma, is that we have to live together with social beings, and that's the tension, you see. You know, we have to accept constraints, and with freedoms come responsibilities, and but the need to conform and not to be able to quite do exactly what we might want to do in a particular situation.
It's a good distinction between liberty and license. It's one that John Milton makes much of in Paradise Lost. License is the devil's work, and liberty is only possible under law.
I think actually there was a point that was brought up in this. I remember chatting with another person, something around this idea is actually this term free market was never really meant to be, in a sense, that a company can do what it wants. The whole purpose behind it was that constraints are placed upon a market such that it still remains free when it's implemented. In other words, an oligarchy is no more free than a dictatorship.
It's funny how the current sort of global financial issues that have come up, that while there are constraints on economic development, capitalism seems to try to find the cracks like salt dam in the law and sort of work its way between them. The subprime mortgages are an example of what hedge funds or tools that were invented precisely because law hadn't gone there yet. Nobody imagined them being able to do that.
Yes, it's the whole thing that even in somewhere like communist Russia, still there was a thriving underground economy because the idea that greed will find a way.
Yeah.
The free market depends on a banking system, and I think it was Jefferson who said in 1780 something or other, the greatest risk to democratic freedoms will come from the bankers.
Another prescient Unitarian, Jefferson.
Yeah. Mason, Rosicrucian, Unitarian.
Everything Aryan is.
Vegetarian.
And keeper of slaves. Said he meant well.
But,
It's funny, I was reflecting on being a parent and talking about that sort of limits on your freedom and that sort of thing. How much you gain at the same time as your freedom is being limited. And so it's sort of real sort of yin and yang, isn't it?
absolutely.
And yet, you wouldn't give it up for the world at the same time.
Most of the time. I often think of just in the creative process how useful it is to have a really firm set of parameters to free you up. There's nothing as frightening as a blank page. And I can start anywhere. I mean, usually I try to get the frame set very quickly. The poets used to train themselves by practicing on the sonnet form, which is a notoriously difficult form. 14 lines of iambic pentameter. You have to make what you want to say fit in that very rigid grid. And if you're free to do that, then you can start playing around with form later on. It's often I like the constraints in the creative process. Otherwise, I go mad with options and they're sorry.
It strikes me, Rob, freedom these days is not something we perhaps tend to give much thought to, because for many of us, we haven't experienced the alternative. We haven't grown up under communist regimes, and we've been generally free to think what we want. So we tend not to give it.
Well, this is the insidious.
Something we take for granted, I suppose.
Yeah.
We don't pause as we ought to think about.
This is one of the things about the insidiousness of common sense, is that we don't, because it's like the water we swim in, it's the ideas that the frames we share to make sense of the world, and they're reproduced in the media and reproduced in the culture. We don't question the construction of those because they just are the way the world hangs together for us. The notion of the notions I brought up: democracy, freedom, sexual relations, that sort of thing. These are learned. These are cultural constructs. These are not eternal truths, written by the hand of God. They're capable of question, and it's where we step between our reaction and our thought and our reaction with our rational questioning minds. That is, for me, the locus where we can start to liberate this a bit.
It was interesting. It was an interesting thought. You can almost spot it if you have a person standing up and they use particular catchphrases. They use expressions of only one or two words, and then everybody around nods very quietly. You can almost see a blind spot. The sheer assumption of it all is quite extraordinary. An interesting thought, just on the thing that you were talking about, dialectic. This was something I was reading prior. Sort of a criticism of dialectic in a way is this idea that it presents the possibility that one of the options isn't simply wrong.
Yes. Yes, that's good. Hopefully, you get, as in like current political changeover in the U.S., you get the thesis of, might is right, and the antithesis, actually diplomatic dialogue is right, coming together, and what you get is we're going to talk and we're going to leave troops in for a while. We get the synthesis kind of result from it. But yes, I mean, the term dialectics borrowed from Marx, although much discredited, you think really worth rereading. Yes.
One more reflection from me on the extent to which we have to take these events for granted is that I was just thinking we probably live in a culture that was formed by people from all parts of the planet who were seeking freedom. So we live within this culture that's largely built upon people really seeking freedom. And reflect on some of my ancestors who worked in the cotton mills. They were lace makers in Nottingham and moved to Calais. And when the lace industry collapsed in Calais, they would rather have come to the complete unknown of South Australia and then return across the English Channel to Nottingham and the prospect of continuing to make lace there.
What they brought with them,
There's,
of course, mental structures that we're going to reproduce. As what else could they do? The world that
the world to go to extremes.
Absolutely.
To seek freedom, in their case, economic. In the case of the people that handle religious freedoms.
Talk about a blank piece of paper.
Well, they might have been lured by reading Wakefield, and what we had was a very bold social experiment in South Australia. It was to be
Utopia,
a very planned and ordered settlement, and the money raised from the sale of land was to be of sufficient price to bring out the tradespeople and artisans and whatever. But of course, a few of our well-known forebears, whose names you'll all recognise, bought up vast tracts of land and sat on it and speculated and put themselves beyond the spirit and letter of the law immediately, and were amply rewarded by having made those acquisitions. but it came a bit unstuck.
Well, being a merely human construct. So then you bring sort of the European rational idea of a governed society to a blank slate of a country like this, and you end up, you remake the world as you know it one way or the other. I always used to think, living in England, that one of the reasons I didn't like it was that all the best seats were taken, and had been for hundreds of years. It's not really that much different. You know. Well, thank you all for that. As usual, because I don't write it, that's my favorite part of these services. Let's join in singing our closing hymn, True Freedom.